So Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have a real dig at Freeland today about the interest rates on mortgages and trying to get inflation back to where it should be. It's absolutely ridiculous at the moment. It's crazy. People will lose their houses over this. They will lose houses. There's no doubt. No, not everyone can afford to these increased prices. You know, the average mortgage is over $4,000 extra a month. I know. Let's have a listen to what they were saying.
Speaker, the Liberals are out of touch and Canadians are out of money. These inflationary deficits are causing Canadians to miss meals, use food banks, and for young people to abandon the hope of owning a home. In a couple more weeks, a second carbon tax will kick in, further driving up the price of gas to add 61 cents a litre, which is pouring more gas on the inflationary fire. Terrible. Mortgages and rents have doubled. The combined carbon taxes will cost families $4,000 extra a year. With all the wildfires raging in Canada, there will be stiff penalties for the arsonists responsible. But what will be the punishment for the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister who are deliberately setting the inflationary fire? I reiterate my party's call for the Liberals to work throughout the summer to draft a budget that will combat inflation, reduce interest rates, axe the carbon tax, and make it possible to build more homes. Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home! Yeah!
1 week ago today, the Leader of the Opposition vowed to use all procedural tools to block the budget from passing, including 900 amendments and lengthy speeches. But despite his nearly 4-hour-long speech last Wednesday evening, during which he talked about Winston Churchill, Henry VIII, his favorite podcaster, Jordan Peterson, the stonework in Parliament, and why the floors in here are green, never once did he mention how the budget will support Canadians through expanding dental care, creating the new first home savings account, or investing in the clean economy that will create thousands of jobs for Canadians. Nonetheless, the very next day, this House passed Budget 2023. That will provide the much-needed supports for Canadians right across the country. While the Conservative Party continues to play procedural games, Mr. Speaker, this government will continue to do the hard work and deliver results for Canadians.
The Prime Minister has doubled housing costs by $500 billion of inflationary deficits, and by giving billions of dollars to local gatekeepers who block housing construction with the second slowest housing permits of any country in the entire OECD. Now, the deficits the Prime Minister is running risk increasing interest rates further and causing people to lose their homes to higher mortgage prices. Will the government introduce a balanced budget to bring down inflation and interest rates so that Canadians don't lose their homes?
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the OECD, what the Leader of the Opposition should know and should be sharing with Canadians is that last week the OECD forecast that Canada would have the strongest economic growth in the G7 over 23 and 24. But what is truly appalling, Mr. Speaker, and frankly really disappointing, is that these Conservatives, at a time when forest fires have been raging across our country, would prefer to play partisan games rather than support our sensible measures to build the clean economy we desperately need.
And sometimes it's like bashing your head up against the wall.
The question was about the doubling of housing costs. This Prime Minister has brought in $500 billion of inflationary spending, which doubled rent costs, mortgage payments, and needed down payments for the average house. And now the IMF says that Canada is the country most at risk of a massive mortgage default, as our households have the most debt as a share of GDP of any country in the G7. That debt is about to collide with soaring interest rates driven by this government's deficits. Will they eliminate the deficits, balance the budgets to bring down inflation and interest rates before Canadians lose their homes?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear the Leader of the Opposition cite the IMF. And I hope that that means he is aware that it is the IMF which confirms that Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7 and the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 by some measure. But, Mr. Speaker, I really have to point out to the Canadians listening to us the appalling behavior of this reckless and irresponsible opposition, which has been blocking sensible, important measures to support Canadians at a critical time.
Does she ever answer a question?
It's not just homeowners, Mr. Speaker. Because this government has been giving billions to local gatekeepers who block affordable housing construction, and because their inflationary policies have doubled the rent, the students are now living in squalor. You used to be able to get an apartment, a full apartment, for $840 before this Prime Minister. Now, CBC is reporting that a student from Guelph has had to pay $840 just for a room in an apartment she shares with 6 other students that is mold and insect infested and doesn't even have running water. Will they reverse their inflationary policies so Canadians don't have...
Well, I think we're just going to keep battling and battling and battling until they do something about inflation and how far are the interest rates going to go? Where's it going to end? How much are you going to end up paying? It's ridiculous. Till next time.